The soldiers thought Corporal Elena Vasquez's weak grip would get someone killed in combat. They had no idea that the same grip would save 12 hostages and end a standoff that had paralyzed an entire military base for half a day with a single impossible shot that redefined everything they thought they knew about precision marksmanship. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena stepped off the transport helicopter at Forward Operating Base Serpent, her boots hitting the dusty Afghan soil with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to move through the world without drawing unnecessary attention. At 24, she carried herself with the measured grace of a person who understood that survival often depended on being underestimated. The November sun blazed mercilessly over the remote outpost nestled in the Hindu Kush Mountains, and Elena adjusted the strap of her rifle case as she surveyed the collection of concrete barriers, prefabricated buildings, and guard towers that would be her home for the next 18 months. This assignment wasn't supposed to define her career. 6 months earlier, she had been Specialist Vasquez of the 75th Ranger Regiment, serving as a designated marksman with Alpha Company during high-intensity operations across the Helmand province. Her service record was exemplary, her shooting scores consistently in the top percentile, and her tactical awareness had saved lives on multiple occasions. But a training accident during a live-fire exercise had damaged the tendons in her right hand, leaving her with reduced grip strength that medical evaluators deemed insufficient for frontline combat operations. The injury had been devastating in ways that went beyond the physical limitations. Elena's identity had been built around her role as a precision shooter, someone whose steady hands and unwavering focus could deliver accurate fire under the most challenging conditions. When the Military Medical Board declared her unfit for her primary military occupational specialty, it felt like losing a fundamental part of herself. The recommendation for reassignment to a support role had been delivered with clinical detachment, but Elena had heard the unspoken message clearly. Her days as an elite soldier were over. Captain Marcus Reid, her former company commander, and the person who had recommended her for Ranger training, had thrown her a lifeline when the reassignment papers came through. Elena, he had told her over a secure video call from his new posting at FOB Serpent, I need someone with your technical knowledge and training background. We're establishing an advanced marksmanship program for soldiers transitioning from standard infantry to specialized reconnaissance units. It's not frontline combat, but it's meaningful work that could help prepare the next generation of precision shooters. The offer had been both a blessing and a curse. It allowed Elena to remain in a military role that utilized her expertise, but it also felt like accepting defeat. She would be training others to do the job she could no longer perform at the highest level. The irony wasn't lost on her that her weakened grip, the very thing that had ended her combat career, would now be scrutinized by soldiers she was supposed to be teaching. FOB Serpent was a study in organized chaos, with soldiers from multiple units conducting training exercises, intelligence operations, and logistical support for missions throughout the region. The base housed approximately 800 personnel, ranging from seasoned special operations veterans to newly arrived soldiers getting their first taste of deployment life. Elena's assignment placed her within the Special Training Detachment, a unit responsible for advanced weapons training, tactical development, and cross-training between different military specialties. As she made her way toward the administrative building to complete her in-processing, Elena caught fragments of conversations from passing soldiers. The mix of accents and unit insignia told the story of a truly joint operation, with Army Rangers working alongside Marine Force reconnaissance, Air Force combat controllers coordinating with Navy SEALs, and conventional infantry units learning from special operations veterans. It was exactly the kind of environment where Elena's diverse training background should have been an asset, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her medical limitations would overshadow her qualifications. The administrative clerk, a young corporal who barely looked old enough to be in high school, much less deployed to Afghanistan, processed Elena's paperwork with the efficient boredom of someone who had completed this routine hundreds of times. Vasquez, Elena, specialist. Wait, it says here corporal. Recent promotion? He asked, looking up from his computer screen with mild interest. Field promotion, Elena replied simply, not elaborating on the circumstances that had led to her advancement in rank just weeks before her medical reassignment. The promotion had been Captain Reid's final gesture of support, ensuring that her new position came with the authority and pay grade appropriate to her experience level. Well, congratulations, Corporal. You're assigned to Building C7, the Special Training Detachment. Sergeant First Class Williams is expecting you. The clerk handed her a folder containing base maps, safety briefings, and administrative requirements. Fair warning, SFC Williams runs a tight program. He's got high standards and doesn't make exceptions for anyone, regardless of their background. Elena thanked the clerk and made her way across the base toward Building C7. The structure was larger than most of the other administrative buildings, with exterior modifications that suggested it had been adapted for specialized training purposes. Through the windows, she could see classroom spaces equipped with advanced simulation equipment, weapon storage areas secured behind heavy steel doors, and what appeared to be a briefing room with topographical maps covering every available wall. Surface, the entrance to Building C7 opened into a reception area that felt more like a military museum than a typical unit headquarters. Display cases contained examples of precision weapons from multiple nations, historical photographs of famous military marksmen, and technical diagrams illustrating ballistic principles and advanced shooting techniques. Elena paused to examine a display case containing a Vietnam-era sniper rifle, noting the modifications and customizations that spoke to the user's deep understanding of their craft. Impressed by the hardware? A gravelly voice asked from behind her. Elena turned to see a tall, lean man in his early 40s approaching with the deliberate gait of someone whose joints had absorbed too many years of hard military service. His name tape read Williams, and his uniform showed the subdued insignia of a Sergeant First Class, with tabs indicating Ranger and Special Forces qualifications. It's an impressive collection, Sergeant, Elena replied, extending her hand for a firm handshake that she hoped wouldn't reveal the weakness that had derailed her career. Corporal Vasquez reporting for duty. Williams accepted the handshake with a grip that was firm but not challenging, his weathered face studying Elena with the kind of assessment that experienced soldiers performed instinctively when meeting someone new. I've read your file, Vasquez. Impressive record with the 75th. Captain Reid speaks highly of your technical knowledge and training capabilities. Elena felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. She had learned to recognize the moment when commanders transition from discussing her past accomplishments to addressing her current limitations. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm looking forward to contributing to the program. Good, Williams said, his tone remaining neutral. Let me show you around and introduce you to the team you'll be working with. Fair warning, this isn't a typical training environment. We're preparing soldiers for missions where the margin for error is measured in millimeters and milliseconds. Everyone here has earned their position through demonstrated excellence, and they expect the same from their instructors. As they walked through the building, Williams provided a running commentary on the various training areas and their purposes. The classroom spaces were equipped with ballistic computers, environmental monitoring equipment, and simulation systems that could replicate shooting conditions from around the world. The weapons storage areas contained an arsenal that included precision rifles from multiple manufacturers, each maintained to exacting standards and zeroed for specific ammunition types and environmental conditions. Our current training cycle includes 12 soldiers from 6 different units, Williams explained as they approached a classroom where Elena could hear the low murmur of technical discussions. They're here for an 8-week advanced marksmanship course that covers everything from basic precision shooting to extreme range engagements under adverse conditions. Your job will be to teach the theoretical foundations while assisting with practical applications. Williams paused outside the classroom door, his expression becoming more serious. Vasquez, I'm going to be straight with you about something. This group includes some of the most competitive and accomplished shooters in their respective units. They're here because they're already exceptional, and they know it. They're going to test you, challenge your knowledge, and look for any weakness they can exploit. It's not personal. It's how high performers establish hierarchy and credibility. Elena nodded, appreciating the warning while feeling her anxiety ratchet up another level. I understand, Sergeant. I've worked with competitive personalities before. I'm sure you have, Williams said, opening the classroom door. But understanding it intellectually and experiencing it in person are 2 different things. These soldiers have been training together for 3 weeks. They've established their own internal dynamics and pecking order. You're the outsider coming into their established environment. The classroom fell silent as Elena followed Williams through the door. 12 soldiers in various uniforms turned to assess the newcomer, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Elena immediately noted the mix of rank insignia and unit patches. This was indeed an elite group, with representation from Rangers, Special Forces, Marine Scout snipers, and other specialized units. The average age appeared to be late 20s to early 30s, suggesting soldiers with significant experience and proven track records. Gentlemen, Williams announced to the group, this is Corporal Vasquez. She'll be joining our instructional team, bringing expertise in precision shooting theory and advanced ballistic principles. Corporal Vasquez comes to us from the 75th Ranger Regiment with extensive combat experience and specialized training in long-range marksmanship. Elena stepped forward, maintaining confident posture despite feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes evaluating everything from her uniform presentation to her physical bearing. Thank you, Sergeant Williams. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and contributing to what I understand is an exceptional training program. The responses were polite but restrained, nods of acknowledgement, murmured greetings, but nothing that suggested immediate acceptance or enthusiasm. Elena had expected this reaction and understood that credibility would have to be earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted based on her introduction. Williams gestured toward the front of the classroom, where technical diagrams covered a large whiteboard. We were just reviewing environmental factors affecting bullet trajectory at extended ranges. Perhaps Corporal Vasquez could share some insights from her field experience with atmospheric condition calculations. It was a test, Elena realized, an opportunity to demonstrate her knowledge in front of the group while establishing her credentials as an instructor. She moved to the whiteboard and began walking through the complex mathematical relationships between barometric pressure, temperature, humidity, and projectile behavior. Drawing on experiences from dozens of combat engagements, where precise calculations had meant the difference between mission success and failure. As she spoke, Elena noticed the group's attention becoming more focused. These were soldiers who understood the life and death importance of the technical principles she was explaining, and they could recognize expertise when they heard it. Questions began coming from the audience, challenging but respectful. Inquiries that suggested genuine interest in her knowledge rather than attempts to embarrass or undermine her credibility. The session continued for another hour, with Elena fielding increasingly complex questions about ballistic coefficients, wind reading techniques, and range estimation methods. By the time Williams called a break, she felt cautiously optimistic that she had made a positive first impression. Several soldiers approached with follow-up questions or comments about specific scenarios they had encountered, treating her as a knowledgeable colleague rather than an outsider. Elena also noticed one soldier who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the session. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison sat in the back row, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. His uniform showed Ranger tabs and a Special Forces patch, along with ribbons indicating multiple combat deployments. When their eyes met briefly, Elena saw something that made her stomach tighten. Not hostility exactly, but a kind of watchful skepticism that suggested he wasn't convinced by her classroom performance. As the group dispersed for their break, Williams approached Elena with what might have been approval in his expression. "Good start, Vasquez. You know your material, and you can explain complex concepts clearly. That's exactly what this program needs." "Thank you, Sergeant," Elena replied, but her attention was partially focused on Morrison, who was gathering his materials with deliberate slowness while listening to their conversation. "Tomorrow we move to practical applications," Williams continued. "The group will be conducting live-fire exercises on the 1,000-meter range, working through advanced shooting positions and environmental challenges. You'll be assisting with instruction and evaluation." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Classroom instruction was one thing. She could handle theoretical discussions and technical explanations without her grip strength becoming an issue, but practical shooting exercises would inevitably require her to demonstrate the technique she was teaching, and that was where her medical limitations would become apparent to everyone in the program. "Looking forward to it," Elena said, hoping her voice didn't betray the anxiety she was feeling. Morrison finally approached, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," he said as they shook hands. Elena noticed that his grip was firm and strong, a subtle reminder of the physical capabilities that elite soldiers were expected to possess. "Interesting session today. I'm curious to see how your theoretical knowledge translates to practical application tomorrow." His tone was polite, but Elena detected an undercurrent that made her wary. Morrison wasn't just making conversation. He was laying down a challenge, establishing that tomorrow would be a test of more than just her teaching abilities. "I'm sure it will be educational for everyone involved," Elena replied carefully, maintaining eye contact while trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. As Morrison walked away, Elena realized that her real challenges at FOB Serpent were just beginning. The classroom had been the easy part. Tomorrow would determine whether she could maintain credibility when her physical limitations became impossible to hide. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the Hindu Kush Mountains look deceptively peaceful. Elena had spent a restless night reviewing technical manuals and mentally preparing for what she knew would be a crucial day in establishing her credibility with the advanced marksmanship program. The 1,000-meter range at FOB Serpent was considered one of the finest training facilities in the theater of operations, with electronic target systems, environmental monitoring equipment, and observation positions that allowed instructors to evaluate every aspect of a shooter's performance. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison had arrived at the range 30 minutes before the scheduled training time, using the opportunity to inspect equipment and establish himself as the natural leader among the student group. At 31, Morrison embodied everything the military valued in its elite soldiers: physical presence, technical competence, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving multiple combat deployments in the world's most dangerous environments. His service record was exemplary, with commendations for valor under fire and recommendations from commanders who considered him among the finest soldiers they had ever led. Morrison's path to the advanced marksmanship program had been straightforward. Identify the most talented shooters from across the special operations community and provide them with training that would make them even more effective in future missions. He had earned his position through demonstrated excellence, setting range records and proving his abilities in combat situations where precision shooting had directly contributed to mission success. The idea that someone with reduced physical capabilities could provide meaningful instruction to soldiers of his caliber struck him as fundamentally flawed. Regardless of their theoretical knowledge or past accomplishments, Elena approached the range carrying her equipment bag with the same deliberate care she had learned during her years as a designated marksman. Inside the bag was her personal rifle, a precision instrument that had been modified and customized over years of careful adjustment to compensate for the limitations in her grip strength. The modifications were subtle, ergonomic adjustments to the stock, trigger modifications that reduced the force required for consistent brakes, and grip surfaces that provided enhanced traction even with reduced pressure. To a casual observer, the rifle appeared standard, but every component had been selected or modified to work within the constraints of her injury. Sergeant First Class Williams was already conducting equipment inspections when Elena arrived, methodically checking each soldier's rifle, ammunition, and support gear to ensure everything met the program's exacting standards. The 12 students stood in a loose formation, their various uniforms and unit patches creating a visual representation of the military's most elite communities. Elena noticed immediately that Morrison had positioned himself at the front of the group, subtly establishing himself as the unofficial leader among the students. "Good morning, Corporal Vasquez," Williams called out as she approached. "Ready for some practical application of yesterday's theoretical discussions?" "Absolutely, Sergeant," Elena replied, setting down her equipment bag and beginning her own pre-shooting routine. The familiar ritual of preparing her gear provided a calming structure that helped manage her anxiety about the upcoming demonstration of her capabilities. Williams addressed the group as Elena continued her preparations. "Today's exercise will test your ability to engage targets at varying distances under simulated field conditions. We'll start with known distance shots at 600 meters, then progress to unknown distance targets out to 1,000 meters. Environmental conditions include a 15-knot crosswind with variable gusts, and the temperature differential between the firing line and target area will affect bullet trajectory." Morrison stepped forward slightly, his body language suggesting he had something to contribute to the briefing. "Sergeant Williams, will the instructors be demonstrating the techniques before we attempt them? It's helpful to see proper execution before working through the practical application ourselves." Elena felt her stomach tighten as she recognized the challenge embedded in Morrison's seemingly reasonable request. Having instructors demonstrate techniques was indeed standard procedure, but Morrison's timing and tone suggested he was specifically interested in seeing how she would perform under observation. Williams glanced at Elena, clearly understanding the dynamics at play. "Excellent suggestion, Staff Sergeant Morrison," Williams replied. "Corporal Vasquez, would you mind providing a demonstration shot at the 600-meter target? Give the group a baseline to work from." Elena nodded, knowing that refusing would immediately undermine her credibility, but also understanding that her performance in the next few minutes would determine how the group perceived her for the remainder of the program. She moved to the firing line, aware that 12 sets of eyes were analyzing every aspect of her preparation and execution. The 600-meter target was a standard silhouette with scoring rings, positioned on an electronic system that would provide immediate feedback on shot placement. Elena settled into a prone shooting position, using her modified rifle sling to create a stable platform that compensated for her reduced grip strength. Her breathing technique was textbook perfect, and her sight alignment followed the precise methodology she had taught to dozens of soldiers during her years as a designated marksman. Morrison watched with particular attention as Elena prepared for her shot. He noted the way she positioned her hands on the rifle, looking for any sign of the weakness that he suspected existed based on rumors and speculation among the student group. Her grip appeared normal to casual observation, But Morrison's experienced eye detected subtle differences in how she managed recoil and maintained weapon control. Elena's first shot broke cleanly, the electronic target system immediately displaying the result on monitors visible to the entire group. The shot had struck the target center mass, well within the acceptable accuracy standards for the distance and conditions. A murmur of approval rippled through the student group, and Elena felt a momentary surge of confidence as she prepared for her second demonstration shot. The second shot was equally accurate, striking within inches of the first and demonstrating the kind of consistency that marked a skilled precision shooter. Elena completed her demonstration with a third shot that maintained the tight grouping, then cleared her weapon and stepped back from the firing line. The electronic scoring system displayed her results prominently, showing 3 shots within a 4-inch group at 600 meters, performance that would be considered excellent by any standard. "Outstanding shooting, Corporal," Williams announced, loud enough for the entire group to hear. "That's exactly the kind of precision and consistency we're looking for. Staff Sergeant Morrison, you're up first for the student demonstration." Morrison moved to the firing line with the fluid confidence of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. His shooting position was aggressive and athletic, demonstrating the kind of physical control that came from years of intensive training and natural ability. Elena noticed immediately that his grip on the rifle was substantially firmer than her own. His hands locked onto the weapon with the kind of pressure that she could no longer generate consistently. Morrison's first shot struck the target with authority, the impact clearly visible through the spotting scopes as the bullet punched through the paper with devastating accuracy. His second shot followed quickly, placed with the kind of rapid precision that spoke to exceptional hand-eye coordination and weapon control. The third shot completed a group that was marginally tighter than Elena's demonstration, though the difference was small enough that only experienced shooters would notice. As Morrison cleared his weapon and stepped back from the firing line, Elena caught the satisfied smile that played across his features. He had not only matched her performance, but had marginally exceeded it, establishing himself as the standard bearer among the student group. More importantly, he had done so with a shooting style that emphasized the physical attributes where Elena was most vulnerable. "Excellent shooting, Staff Sergeant," Williams commented, reviewing Morrison's scores on the electronic display. "That's the kind of performance that sets the standard for the rest of the group." Morrison nodded acknowledgement of the praise, but his attention was focused on Elena's reaction to his demonstration. He had accomplished his immediate objective of proving that he could match or exceed the instructor's performance, but he was also gathering intelligence about her capabilities and limitations for future challenges. The remaining students took their turns at the firing line, with performance levels varying from competent to exceptional. Elena moved among the group during the exercise, providing technical guidance and troubleshooting shooting problems as they arose. Her knowledge of ballistic principles and environmental factors proved valuable in helping soldiers adjust their techniques for the specific conditions, and she began to feel more confident in her role as an instructor. Corporal Mike Torres, a Marine Scout sniper from Camp Pendleton, was struggling with wind compensation at the 600-meter distance. Elena noticed that he was overcorrecting for the crosswind, placing his shots consistently to the left of the target center. She approached Torres during a break in the firing sequence, offering guidance based on her experience with similar wind conditions in Afghanistan. "Corporal Torres, try reducing your wind hold by half," Elena suggested, kneeling beside him as he prepared for his next shot. "The wind speed is consistent, but you're compensating for gusts that aren't actually affecting your bullet flight at this distance." Torres adjusted his sight picture according to Lana's recommendation, and his next shot struck significantly closer to the target center. "Better?" Elena asked, checking the impact through her spotting scope. "Much better, Corporal," Torres replied, with genuine appreciation. I was definitely overthinking the wind compensation. Thanks for the guidance. Morrison had been observing this interaction from his position nearby, noting how Elena's technical knowledge translated into practical assistance for struggling shooters. He grudgingly acknowledged that her theoretical understanding was solid, but he remained convinced that technical knowledge alone was insufficient for instructing elite soldiers who needed to perform under the most demanding conditions imaginable. As the morning session progressed to longer distances, the challenges became more complex and the margin for error decreased significantly. The 800-meter targets required precise calculations for bullet drop and wind drift, while the 1,000-meter shots demanded absolute perfection in technique and environmental assessment. Elena found herself working harder to maintain accuracy as the distances increased, her modified grip requiring more conscious effort to maintain consistent weapon control. Morrison's performance remained outstanding throughout the distance progression, his shots consistently placing in the center of the targets with the kind of mechanical precision that marked a truly exceptional marksman. His confidence grew with each successful engagement, and Elena noticed that other students were beginning to look to him for leadership and guidance rather than seeking instruction from the official instructors. During the break between firing exercises, Morrison approached Elena with what appeared to be a casual question about ballistic calculations. "Corporal Vasquez, I've been thinking about the wind compensation formulas we discussed yesterday. In your combat experience, how much variance did you see between calculated holds and actual required corrections?" Elena recognized the question. As another form of testing, Morrison was probing her practical experience while simultaneously demonstrating his own sophisticated understanding of advanced shooting principles. "In my experience, calculated holds provide a good starting point, but you always need to validate with observation and adjust based on actual bullet impacts," she replied. "Environmental conditions in theater are rarely as clean as range conditions, so you learn to make rapid adjustments based on what you're seeing downrange." "Interesting," Morrison said, nodding thoughtfully. "I've found that with proper technique and sufficient grip strength, you can maintain consistency even when environmental conditions are challenging. The key is having enough physical control over the weapon to execute identical shots regardless of external factors." Elena felt the subtle challenge in Morrison's comment about grip strength, recognizing that he was beginning to probe the area where she was most vulnerable. Her response needed to acknowledge his point, while avoiding any admission of weakness that could undermine her instructional credibility. "Physical consistency is definitely important," Elena agreed carefully. "But I've also seen exceptional shooters who compensate for physical limitations through superior technique and environmental reading. Sometimes mental preparation and technical knowledge can overcome raw physical advantages." Morrison's smile was polite but skeptical. "Perhaps. Though in my experience, when lives are on the line, you want every advantage you can get, physical, mental, and technical. Limitations in any area can become liability when the stakes are highest." Elena understood that Morrison was laying the groundwork for more direct challenges to her capabilities. He was establishing philosophical positions about the importance of physical prowess while subtly questioning whether someone with limitations could provide effective instruction to soldiers who might face life or death situations requiring maximum performance. Sergeant Williams called the group back to the firing line for the final exercise of the day, unknown distance shooting at targets ranging from 600 to 1,000 meters. This was the most challenging phase of the training, requiring shooters to estimate range, calculate environmental factors, and engage targets without the benefit of confirmed distances or previous shots for reference. Elena knew that this exercise would be her greatest challenge of the day. Unknown distance shooting required not only technical knowledge and shooting skill but also the kind of confidence and decisiveness that came from knowing your equipment and capabilities intimately. Her modified rifle and compensated technique would be tested to their limits, and any hesitation or uncertainty would be immediately apparent to the observing students. As she prepared for her instructor demonstration at an unknown distance target, Elena caught Morrison's eye across the firing line. His expression was attentive and calculating, clearly anticipating this final test of her abilities. Elena realized that the morning's exercises had been preliminary, skirmishes in what was shaping up to be a longer campaign for credibility and respect among the program students. The electronic target systems had been repositioned at unknown distances, and Elena would need to estimate range, calculate environmental corrections, and deliver accurate fire without the benefit of previous reference shots. As she settled into her shooting position, Elena felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through countless similar challenges during her combat deployments. Morrison watched intently as Elena began her range estimation process, noting every aspect of her technique and preparation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to test the boundaries of her capabilities, but today's exercises had already begun to reveal the fault lines, where pressure could be applied most effectively. The unknown distance exercise proved to be exactly the challenge Elena had anticipated. As she settled behind her rifle, estimating the range to a target that could be anywhere from 700 to 950 meters away, she felt the weight of 12 sets of eyes, analyzing every aspect of her technique. The target appeared smaller than the previous known distance shots, and the afternoon light created shadows that made precise range estimation more difficult. Elena began her systematic approach to unknown distance shooting, using landmark references and angular measurements to estimate the target's distance. Through her scope, she identified terrain features at known distances and used them to triangulate the target's position. Her calculations suggested approximately 820 meters, requiring significant compensation for both bullet drop and the persistent crosswind that had been challenging shooters throughout the day. Morrison positioned himself at an observation point where he could watch Elena's preparation process while remaining close enough to hear any verbal cues she might give about her calculations. His own experience with unknown distance shooting told him that the target was positioned at approximately 815 meters, and he was curious to see how accurately Elena would estimate the range without the benefit of laser rangefinders or other technological assistance. Elena's first shot broke cleanly after a deliberate sight picture and controlled breathing sequence. The bullet's impact was visible through spotting scopes, striking the target slightly low and to the right of center mass. The placement indicated that her range estimation had been reasonably accurate, but her wind compensation had been insufficient for the gusty conditions at that distance. "Good first shot, Corporal," Williams called out from his observation position. "What's your assessment for the correction?" Elena studied the bullet impact through her scope, calculating the necessary adjustments for elevation and windage. "Target appears to be approximately 820 meters, she announced to the group. "First shot impacted low right, suggesting I need to come up 2 minutes of angle and left 1.5 minutes for wind." Morrison nodded slightly, acknowledging that Elena's range estimation had been quite accurate and her impact analysis was technically sound. Her corrections were appropriate for the observed bullet placement, demonstrating the kind of systematic approach that marked a competent precision shooter. Elena's second shot incorporated her calculated corrections, and the bullet impact moved significantly closer to the target center. The adjustment had been appropriate, placing the shot within the scoring rings and demonstrating her ability to read bullet impacts and make accurate corrections. A murmur of approval came from several students who recognized the difficulty of making precise adjustments on unknown distance targets. Morrison's turn at the unknown distance target began with the same systematic approach Elena had demonstrated, but his execution carried a confidence and aggressiveness that suggested complete faith in his calculations and technique. His range estimation process was rapid but thorough, using multiple reference points to confirm his distance assessment before settling into his shooting position. Morrison's first shot struck the target with devastating accuracy, impacting dead center and eliminating any need for correction shots. The precision of his initial impact drew impressed comments from the other students and established a new standard for unknown distance performance. Elena had to acknowledge that Morrison's shooting was exceptional by any measure, demonstrating the kind of intuitive accuracy that came from years of intensive training and natural talent. "Outstanding first-round hit, Staff Sergeant Morrison," Williams announced, genuine appreciation evident in his voice. "That's exactly the kind of performance we're looking for in advanced marksmen." Morrison accepted the praise with appropriate modesty, but Elena caught the satisfied expression that briefly crossed his features. He had not only demonstrated superior shooting performance, but had done so immediately after her own competent, but less spectacular showing. The comparison was inevitable, and Morrison had clearly established himself as the superior marksman among the group. Corporal Sarah Kim, an Army Ranger from the 3rd Battalion, approached Elena during a break between firing exercises with questions about her shooting technique. Kim had been struggling with consistency throughout the morning session, and her unknown distance shot had missed the target entirely due to significant range estimation errors. "Corporal Vasquez, I'm having trouble with my range estimation," Kim admitted, her frustration evident despite her attempts to maintain professional composure. "My calculations seem sound, but my actual impacts are consistently different from what I'm expecting." Elena appreciated Kim's willingness to seek assistance, recognizing the courage it took for a ranger to admit difficulty with fundamental skills in front of such an accomplished group. "Let's work through your process step by step," Elena suggested, moving to where Kim had set up her shooting position. "Show me how you're estimating range and calculating your corrections." Kim explained her methodology, which was technically accurate but relied heavily on theoretical calculations without sufficient emphasis on practical observation and adjustment. Elena recognized the problem immediately. Kim was trying to solve unknown distance shooting through pure mathematics rather than combining calculations with empirical observation and experience-based intuition. "Your calculations are correct," Elena explained patiently, "but unknown distance shooting requires you to validate your theoretical work with practical observation. Look at how the target appears in your scope compared to known distance targets. Notice how atmospheric conditions are affecting visibility and contrast at this range." Elena guided Kim through a more comprehensive assessment process, teaching her to use multiple indicators for range estimation and to trust her observations when they contradicted her calculations. The instruction was detailed and methodical, drawing on Elena's extensive combat experience with precision, shooting under challenging conditions. Morrison had been observing this interaction from nearby, noting Elena's teaching methodology and the students' response to her guidance. He grudgingly acknowledged that Elena's instructional technique was effective, but he remained convinced that her physical limitations would eventually become a liability in the program's more demanding exercises. As Kim prepared for another attempt at the unknown distance target, Elena provided final guidance on sight picture and breathing technique. "Remember, trust your range estimation, but be prepared to adjust based on what you observe. The first shot gives you information. Use it to make your second shot perfect." Kim's improved approach resulted in a significantly better shot, striking the target within the scoring rings and demonstrating the value of Elena's instruction. The success was particularly satisfying for Elena, who felt that her teaching abilities were being validated despite Morrison's superior shooting performance. Sergeant Williams called the group together for a brief after-action review of the morning's exercises. "Today's performance demonstrates both the challenges and opportunities in advanced marksmanship training," he began. "Unknown distance shooting requires technical knowledge, practical experience, and the confidence to trust your calculations under pressure. Williams reviewed individual performances, highlighting successful techniques and areas for improvement. Morrison's exceptional shooting earned specific recognition, while Elena's teaching effectiveness during Kim's struggles was also acknowledged. The balanced feedback suggested that Williams was carefully managing the competitive dynamics within the group while maintaining instructional objectives. "Tomorrow we'll be conducting stress fire exercises," Williams announced, his tone becoming more serious. "These drills simulate combat conditions with time pressure, physical stress, and decision-making. Requirements: the exercises are designed to test your ability to maintain precision under adverse conditions." Elena felt her anxiety spike at the mention of stress fire exercises. Physical stress would exacerbate the limitations in her grip strength and time. Pressure would reduce her ability to compensate through careful technique and positioning. She realized that tomorrow would likely be the day when her medical limitations became apparent to everyone in the program. Morrison's reaction to the stress fire announcement was noticeably different from Elena's anxiety. His expression showed anticipation and confidence, clearly viewing the upcoming exercises as an opportunity to further demonstrate his superior capabilities. The prospect of combining shooting skills with physical challenges played directly to his strengths while potentially exposing Elena's weaknesses. During the lunch break, Morrison approached Elena with what appeared to be a casual conversation about the afternoon's training schedule. "Corporal Vasquez, I'm curious about your experience with stress fire exercises during your time with the Rangers. Did you find that combat conditions significantly affected your shooting performance?" Elena recognized the question as another form of probing, designed to gather information about her experience while potentially revealing concerns about her ability to perform under stress. "Combat conditions definitely add complexity," she replied. "Carefully, but proper training and mental preparation help maintain performance standards even under pressure." "Absolutely," Morrison agreed, his tone conversational but his eyes watchful. "I've found that physical conditioning and grip strength become particularly important when you're shooting under stress. Fatigue and adrenaline can really compromise fine motor control if you don't have adequate physical reserves." Elena felt the subtle challenge in Morrison's comment about grip strength, recognizing that he was continuing to probe the area where she was most vulnerable. His strategy appeared to be establishing physical prowess as the fundamental requirement for advanced marksmanship, setting up future challenges that would test her limitations. "Mental preparation is equally important," Elena countered, maintaining her composure despite recognizing the direction of Morrison's probing. "I've seen excellent shooters maintain performance under stress through superior technique and psychological preparation, even when physical conditions weren't optimal." Morrison nodded politely, but his expression suggested skepticism about Elena's emphasis on mental factors over physical capabilities. "Perhaps we'll have opportunities to test different approaches during tomorrow's stress fire exercises," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elena understood that Morrison was essentially declaring his intention to use tomorrow's exercises as a direct challenge to her capabilities. The stress fire drills would provide the perfect opportunity to test whether her compensated technique could maintain effectiveness under physical and psychological pressure. The afternoon session focused on advanced ballistic calculations and environmental assessment techniques. Elena found herself in her element during the classroom portion, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of atmospheric effects, ballistic coefficients, and trajectory optimization. Her knowledge was encyclopedic, drawing on years of study and practical application in combat environments. Several students asked increasingly complex questions about ballistic principles, clearly testing the depth of Elena's expertise. She handled each inquiry with confidence and precision, providing detailed explanations that demonstrated mastery of the subject matter. Even Morrison seemed impressed by her theoretical knowledge, though his expression suggested he viewed academic expertise as insufficient for practical application. Specialist David Chun, a Special Forces soldier from the 5th Group, raised a question about extreme range shooting that pushed Elena's knowledge to its limits. Corporal Vasquez, at ranges beyond 1,500 meters, how do you account for Coriolis effects and the interaction between multiple environmental factors? Elena's response was detailed and accurate, drawing on advanced ballistic theory and specific examples from ultra-long-range shooting scenarios. Her explanation impressed the entire group, including Morrison, who recognized that her theoretical understanding exceeded that of most military marksmen. The depth of her knowledge began to earn grudging respect from students, who had initially been skeptical of her qualifications. As the afternoon session concluded, Elena felt cautiously optimistic about her progress in establishing credibility with the group. Her teaching effectiveness was becoming apparent, and her theoretical knowledge was clearly superior to most students' understanding. However, she remained anxious about tomorrow's stress-fire exercises, knowing that physical challenges would test the boundaries of her compensated technique. Morrison's parting comment as the group dispersed reinforced Elena's concerns about the upcoming challenges. "Looking forward to tomorrow's practical applications, Corporal," he said with apparent sincerity. "It should be interesting to see how different approaches to marksmanship hold up under combat-realistic conditions." Elena nodded acknowledgement, understanding that Morrison was essentially serving notice that tomorrow would be a direct test of her capabilities under the most challenging conditions the program could provide. The stakes were clear. Success would validate her role as an instructor, while failure could undermine everything she had worked to establish. As she cleaned her equipment that evening, Elena reflected on the day's mixed outcomes. Her teaching abilities had been demonstrated, and her theoretical knowledge had impressed even skeptical students. However, Morrison's superior shooting performance and continued probing about physical capabilities suggested that her greatest challenges lay ahead. Tomorrow's stress-fire exercises would determine whether Elena's compensated technique and superior knowledge could overcome the physical limitations that had ended her combat career. Morrison clearly believed that raw physical capability would prove decisive, and Elena knew she would need every advantage her experience and preparation could provide. The stress-fire exercises began at dawn with a physical conditioning circuit designed to elevate heart rates and induce the kind of physiological stress that soldiers experience during combat operations. Elena arrived at the training area 30 minutes early, using the additional time to complete her own warm-up routine and mentally prepare for what she knew would be the most challenging day of her assignment at FOB Serpent. The obstacle course had been specifically designed to test the physical capabilities that elite soldiers relied upon during high-stress missions. Rope climbs, wall traversals, heavy equipment carries, and sprint intervals would push each participant to their limits before they attempted precision shooting under time pressure. Elena studied the course layout, identifying areas where her grip strength limitations might become problematic and developing strategies to compensate through superior technique and efficient movement. Morrison arrived with his usual confidence, surveying the obstacle course with the practiced eye of someone who had excelled at physical challenges throughout his military career. His assessment was rapid and systematic, identifying the most efficient approaches to each obstacle while calculating the energy expenditure required to maintain shooting performance afterward. The combination of physical and marksmanship challenges played directly to his strengths, and his anticipation was evident in his focused preparation routine. Sergeant Williams gathered the group for a detailed briefing on the day's exercises. "Today's training simulates the physical and psychological stress you'll encounter during actual combat operations," he explained, his tone emphasizing the serious nature of the upcoming challenges. "You'll complete the obstacle course at maximum intensity, then immediately transition to precision shooting at multiple distances under time pressure." Elena listened carefully as Williams outlined the specific requirements for each phase of the exercise. The obstacle course would be completed individually with times recorded for later analysis. Immediately upon finishing the physical portion, each soldier would move to the firing line for a series of precision shots at targets ranging from 300 to 800 meters, with strict time limits for each engagement. The shooting portion includes both known and unknown distance targets, Williams continued, with scoring based on accuracy, speed, and decision-making under pressure. You'll have limited ammunition, so every shot counts toward your final evaluation. Morrison raised his hand with a question that Elena immediately recognized as strategic positioning. Sergeant Williams, will instructors be participating in the full exercise alongside students? It would be valuable to see how experienced personnel perform under these conditions. Elena felt her stomach tighten as she recognized Morrison's tactical maneuvering. By requesting that instructors participate in the full exercise, he was essentially challenging her to demonstrate her capabilities under the most demanding conditions the program could provide. Refusing would appear unprofessional and undermine her credibility, but participating would expose her physical limitations to the entire group. Williams glanced at Elena, clearly understanding the dynamics at play in Morrison's request. Excellent suggestion, Staff Sergeant Morrison. Corporal Vasquez, would you be willing to demonstrate the complete exercise for the group? Elena nodded without hesitation, knowing that any sign of reluctance would be interpreted as weakness or fear. Absolutely, Sergeant Williams. I'd be happy to provide a demonstration. Morrison's satisfied expression confirmed that he had successfully maneuvered Elena into a position where her limitations would be tested under maximum scrutiny. The other students showed increased interest, clearly anticipating an opportunity to evaluate their instructor's capabilities under conditions that would reveal any weaknesses or inadequacies. Elena began her approach to the obstacle course with deliberate focus, drawing on mental preparation techniques she had learned during Ranger training to manage anxiety and maintain concentration. The first obstacle was a rope climb that required upper body strength and grip endurance, exactly the kind of challenge where her limitations would be most apparent. As Elena grasped the rope and began her ascent, she immediately felt the strain in her hands and forearms. The damaged tendons in her right hand made it difficult to maintain the crushing grip pressure that rope climbing typically required, forcing her to rely more heavily on her legs and core strength to compensate. Her technique was efficient, but visibly different from the aggressive, grip-dependent approach that most soldiers used. Morrison watched Elena's rope climb with particular attention, noting the way she favored her left hand and used leg techniques to reduce the load on her grip strength. Her approach was effective but clearly compensatory, confirming his suspicions about physical limitations that could become problematic under combat conditions. Elena completed the rope climb successfully, but with obvious effort. Her breathing, already elevated from the combination of physical exertion and the stress of performing under observation. The remaining obstacles, wall traversals, tire flips, and ammunition can carries, would test different aspects of her physical capabilities while maintaining the cardiovascular stress that would affect her shooting performance. The wall traversal required Elena to support her full body weight while moving laterally across a series of handholds. Her modified grip meant that she couldn't rely on pure hand strength, forcing her to use momentum and body positioning to reduce the load on her hands. The technique was effective, but required more energy expenditure than the straightforward approach used by soldiers with normal grip strength. Morrison completed his own obstacle course run with impressive efficiency, his powerful physique allowing him to dominate each challenge through a combination of strength, speed, and technique. His time was significantly faster than Elena's, and his physical condition remained optimal for the precision shooting phase that would follow. The contrast between his performance and Elena's compensatory approach was stark and obvious to everyone. Observing, Elena's final obstacle was a timed ammunition carry that required her to transport heavy containers over a measured distance while maintaining speed and control. Her grip limitations made the carry more challenging than it should have been, forcing her to use lifting techniques that distributed the load differently than conventional methods. She completed the challenge successfully, but with additional fatigue that would affect her subsequent shooting performance. As Elena finished the obstacle course, her heart rate was elevated and her hands were already showing signs of fatigue from the grip-intensive challenges. She had approximately 2 minutes to transition to the firing line and begin the precision shooting portion of the exercise, with no recovery time allowed between the physical and marksmanship components. The shooting phase began with a 300-meter target that required rapid engagement under time pressure. Elena's breathing was still elevated from the obstacle course, and her grip felt less secure than usual due to the accumulated fatigue in her hands and forearms. She forced herself to focus on fundamental techniques, using her modified grip and compensated shooting position to maintain accuracy despite the physical stress. Elena's first shot struck the target center mass, demonstrating that her technique remained effective even under challenging conditions. Her follow-up shots maintained acceptable accuracy, though her groups were slightly larger than her unstressed performance from previous days. The time pressure prevented her from using the deliberate preparation that typically helped compensate for her grip limitations. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Morrison's shooting performance after completing the obstacle course was remarkably consistent with his previous demonstrations. His superior physical conditioning meant that the course had less impact on his shooting capabilities, and his natural grip strength remained unaffected by the physical challenges. His shots were precise and rapid, maintaining the mechanical accuracy that had characterized his performance throughout the program. The unknown distance portion of the stress fire exercise presented Elena with her greatest challenge yet. Estimating range and calculating corrections required mental focus that was difficult to maintain, while managing elevated heart rate and physical fatigue. Her grip fatigue made it harder to maintain consistent shooting positions, forcing her to rely more heavily on external support and modified techniques. Elena's unknown distance shots were acceptable but clearly affected by the accumulated stress of the exercise. Her range estimation was accurate, but her shooting groups were larger than her baseline performance, indicating that the combination of physical and mental stress was impacting her precision capabilities. She completed the exercise successfully, but with performance degradation that was apparent to all observers. Morrison's unknown distance shooting remained at his usual high standard, with minimal performance degradation despite the physical challenges. His shots were tight and well placed, demonstrating the kind of consistency that marked truly elite marksmen. The comparison with Elena's stress-affected performance highlighted the advantages of superior physical conditioning and natural capabilities. Sergeant Williams conducted a brief after-action review with both Elena and Morrison before the student exercises began. Corporal Vasquez, your performance demonstrates good technique and mental discipline under stress, he commented diplomatically. The physical challenges clearly affected your shooting precision, but you maintained safety and completed all requirements. Elena accepted the feedback professionally, understanding that Williams was acknowledging both her efforts and her limitations without explicitly criticizing her performance. The message was clear: she had met minimum standards but had not demonstrated the kind of excellence that elite soldiers were expected to maintain under all conditions. Morrison's evaluation was unqualifiedly positive. Outstanding performance, Staff Sergeant Morrison, Williams stated. Your shooting accuracy remained consistent despite significant physical stress. That's exactly the kind of performance we expect from advanced marksmen in combat situations. The contrast between the two evaluations was not lost on the observing students, who began their own attempts at the stress fire exercise with clear expectations about the standards they needed to meet. Elena's demonstration had shown that competent performance was possible under stress, but Morrison's execution had established the gold standard for elite capability. Corporal Torres struggled significantly with the obstacle course, his Marine conditioning proving insufficient for the Army-specific challenges. When he transitioned to the shooting portion, his performance was severely degraded by fatigue and elevated stress levels. Elena worked with him to adjust his technique and manage his breathing, providing guidance that helped him complete the exercise successfully despite his physical limitations. Specialist Shun performed well on the physical challenges, but encountered difficulties with the unknown distance shooting under time pressure. Elena's coaching helped him develop a more systematic approach to range estimation that could be executed rapidly under stress. Her instruction proved valuable in helping Chun adapt his technique to the demanding conditions. Elena noticed that several students were seeking her guidance during the stress fire exercises, despite Morrison's superior demonstration performance. Her ability to help struggling soldiers adapt their techniques to challenging conditions was proving valuable, even if her own physical performance was less than optimal. The teaching skills she had developed through years of instruction were becoming apparent to students who needed practical assistance. Morrison completed his second run through the stress fire exercise with even better performance than his demonstration, further establishing his dominance in the physical and shooting challenges. His consistency under repeated stress was impressive and reinforced his position as the student leader within the program. As the morning session concluded, Elena felt a complex mixture of accomplishment and concern about her performance. She had completed all requirements and provided valuable instruction to struggling students, but her physical limitations had been clearly demonstrated to the entire group. Morrison's superior performance had established a standard that she simply could not match given her medical constraints. During the lunch break, Morrison approached Elena with apparent concern about her visible fatigue from the morning exercises. "Corporal Vasquez, you looked like you were working pretty hard during the obstacle course. Everything okay with your equipment and gear?" Elena recognized the seemingly solicitous inquiry as another form of probing, designed to elicit information about her physical condition while appearing considerate of her welfare. "Just the normal challenges of maintaining performance under stress," she replied carefully. "The exercise design is effective at creating realistic training conditions." Morrison nodded thoughtfully, but his expression suggested he had gathered the information he was seeking about Elena's physical limitations and their impact on her capabilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities for him to further test the boundaries of her compensated technique. The morning after the stress fire exercises brought an unexpected shift in the program's dynamics that Elena hadn't anticipated. Several students who had struggled with the previous day's challenges approached her individually, seeking additional guidance on techniques for managing physical stress while maintaining shooting accuracy. Word had spread through the barracks that Elena's coaching had been instrumental in helping weaker performers complete the exercises successfully. Kim was the first to arrive at Elena's makeshift office in Building C7, carrying a notebook filled with technical questions about breathing control and shooting position modifications. "Corporal Vasquez, I've been thinking about what you taught me yesterday about adapting technique under stress," Kim began, settling into a chair across from Elena's desk. "Could you help me understand how to modify my shooting position when my hands are shaking from fatigue?" Elena appreciated Kim's willingness to acknowledge her difficulties and seek improvement, recognizing the professional courage it took for a ranger to admit technical weaknesses. "The key is building stability from your core and using external support to compensate for reduced fine motor control," Elena explained, pulling out a technical manual with detailed illustrations of shooting positions. Over the next 30 minutes, Elena worked through a systematic approach to maintaining accuracy when physical stress compromised normal shooting technique. She taught Kim how to use sling tension, shooting bags, and bipod adjustments to create stable platforms that didn't rely heavily on grip strength or hand steadiness. The instruction was detailed and practical, drawing on Elena's extensive experience. With adapting techniques to challenging conditions, Morrison observed this interaction from across the building, noting how students were gravitating toward Elena for technical instruction despite his superior performance during the practical exercises. His strategy of demonstrating physical dominance had been successful in establishing his capabilities, but it hadn't translated into the instructional influence he had expected. Students respected his shooting ability, but sought Elena's guidance. When they needed to improve their own performance, Specialist Rodriguez approached Elena next, carrying a rifle that had been giving him accuracy problems during the stress fire exercises. "Corporal, my groups opened up significantly during yesterday's shooting. I'm wondering if there are equipment modifications that might help with consistency under stress." Elena examined Rodriguez's rifle setup with the methodical attention she had learned during her years as a designated marksman. The weapon was properly maintained and zeroed, but the standard configuration wasn't optimized for shooting under physical stress. Elena identified several modifications that could improve stability and reduce the precision demands on the shooter's grip and hand control. "Consider adding an adjustable cheek rest to improve sight alignment consistency," Elena suggested, pointing to specific areas on Rodriguez's rifle. Also, a different sling configuration could provide better support during rapid position changes. "These modifications won't make you a better shooter, but they'll help maintain your existing skills when conditions aren't optimal." Elena's technical knowledge and practical experience with equipment optimization proved valuable to students who were struggling to maintain performance under challenging conditions. Her approach was systematic and thorough, addressing both technique and equipment factors that could impact accuracy under stress. The instruction was particularly valuable because it acknowledged that not every soldier possessed exceptional physical capabilities, but still needed to perform effectively in combat situations. Morrison's frustration with the developing dynamics became apparent during the morning briefing session. When Sergeant Williams asked for volunteer demonstrations of proper shooting technique, Morrison stepped forward aggressively, clearly intending to reassert his dominance over the instructional environment. "I'd like to demonstrate the importance of maintaining proper grip pressure and weapon control under all conditions," Morrison announced, his tone suggesting that he had specific points to make about shooting fundamentals. "I think some students might benefit from seeing how consistent technique translates to consistent performance." Elena recognized Morrison's statement as a direct challenge to her approach of teaching adaptive techniques for soldiers with varying capabilities. He was essentially arguing that superior physical technique was the fundamental requirement for advanced marksmanship, implying that her compensatory methods were inadequate substitutes for proper fundamentals. Williams nodded approval for Morrison's demonstration, clearly interested in seeing how the competitive dynamics between his instructors would play out during practical instruction. "Excellent, Staff Sergeant Morrison. Please demonstrate proper grip and stance techniques for the group." Morrison's demonstration was technically flawless and physically impressive, showing the kind of aggressive weapon control that characterized elite military marksmen. His grip pressure was crushing, his stance athletic and stable, and his shooting sequence rapid and precise. The performance was designed to establish physical prowess as the gold standard for advanced shooting techniques. "As you can see," Morrison explained to the assembled students, "consistent accuracy depends on maintaining identical technique regardless of external conditions. Physical conditioning and proper grip strength allow you to execute the same shot sequence every time, which is essential for reliability in combat situations." Elena felt compelled to provide a different perspective on the technical principles Morrison had demonstrated. "Staff Sergeant Morrison has shown excellent technique. That works very well for soldiers with his physical capabilities," she began diplomatically. It's also important to understand that there are multiple approaches to achieving accuracy, and adaptive techniques can help soldiers maintain performance when standard methods aren't optimal for their specific circumstances. Morrison's expression tightened at Elena's implicit suggestion that his approach might not be universally applicable. Corporal Vasquez, while adaptive techniques might help in training situations, combat conditions demand maximum performance from equipment and personnel. Compromised techniques might work on a range, but they can become liability when lives are at stake. Elena recognized that Morrison was escalating their philosophical disagreement into a direct challenge about the appropriateness of her instructional methods. His argument was sophisticated and appealing to military audiences who valued physical excellence and uncompromising standards. However, Elena's experience with soldiers who had physical limitations gave her a different perspective on the relationship between technique and performance. "I understand your point, Staff Sergeant Morrison," Elena replied, carefully maintaining professional composure despite feeling the pressure of the challenge. "My experience has been that combat effectiveness comes from maximizing whatever capabilities you have available, rather than trying to meet a single standard that might not be achievable for every soldier. Adaptive techniques aren't compromises. They're optimizations for specific circumstances." Morrison's response was immediate and pointed. "But wouldn't you agree that soldiers in elite units should be selected based on their ability to meet uncompromising physical standards? If someone can't maintain proper grip strength under stress, should they be in positions where precision shooting might determine mission success?" Elena felt the trap that Morrison had carefully constructed around their discussion. He was essentially arguing that physical limitations should disqualify soldiers from advanced roles, using her own situation as an implicit example. The challenge was personal and professional, designed to force her to defend not just her teaching methods, but her right to serve in an instructional capacity. Physical standards are important, Elena acknowledged, but they should be related to actual mission requirements rather than theoretical ideals. "I've seen soldiers with various physical characteristics excel in precision shooting through superior preparation, technique, and mental discipline. The goal should be maximizing each individual's potential contribution rather than enforcing uniform approaches that might not be optimal for everyone." Morrison pressed his advantage, sensing that Elena was uncomfortable with the personal implications of their debate. "That's an interesting philosophy, but how do you maintain unit cohesion and reliability when different soldiers are using different techniques and standards? Doesn't that create uncertainty about capabilities and performance under stress?" Elena realized that Morrison was using sophisticated arguments to attack the fundamental premise of adaptive instruction, while positioning himself as the advocate for traditional military excellence. His approach was intellectually appealing and emotionally resonant with students who had been selected for elite programs based on their exceptional capabilities. Unit effectiveness comes from every soldier performing to their maximum potential. Elena responded, drawing on her experience leading diverse teams during combat deployments. "That might mean different techniques for different people, but the outcome standard remains the same: accurate fire when and where it's needed. I've commanded soldiers with varying physical capabilities who all contributed effectively to mission success through optimized individual techniques." Sergeant Williams intervened before the discussion could escalate further, recognizing that the philosophical debate was becoming personal and potentially divisive. "Both perspectives have merit," he stated diplomatically. "Excellence in marksmanship can be achieved through various approaches, and our program should expose students to multiple techniques and philosophies." Elena appreciated Williams's intervention but understood that Morrison had successfully raised questions about her instructional approach that would resonate with students who valued traditional military excellence. The debate had been conducted professionally, but its implications were clear. Morrison was positioning her adaptive techniques as inferior accommodations rather than Legitimate instructional methods. During the lunch break, Elena overheard fragments of conversations between students discussing the morning's exchange between her and Morrison. The reactions were mixed, with some students expressing appreciation for Elena's inclusive approach while others seemed swayed by Morrison's arguments about uncompromising standards. "I like Corporal Vasquez's teaching methods," Corporal Torres commented to Specialist Chun near the entrance to the dining facility. "She helped me understand how to adapt my technique when standard approaches weren't working. That seems more practical than just telling everyone to be stronger." Chun's response was more ambiguous. "Her knowledge is definitely impressive, but Morrison has a point about maintaining standards. In Special Forces, we're selected because we can meet the highest physical requirements. Maybe adaptive techniques are admitting that someone doesn't belong in elite units." Elena understood that Morrison's arguments were having their intended effect, creating doubt about whether accommodating physical limitations was appropriate in elite military training environments. His strategy was subtle but effective, using philosophical principles about military excellence to undermine her credibility without direct personal attacks. Specialist Davis approached Elena after lunch with a question that revealed the impact of Morrison's campaign. "Corporal Vasquez, I've been thinking about the discussion this morning regarding standards and adaptive techniques. How do you balance helping soldiers improve with maintaining the high standards that elite units require?" Elena recognized that Davis was genuinely confused about the competing approaches he had heard advocated. Morrison's arguments had created uncertainty about whether seeking adaptive instruction represented professional improvement or admission of inadequacy. The question required careful handling to address Davis's concerns without appearing defensive. About her methods. "The goal is always maximizing combat effectiveness," Elena explained patiently. "High standards are essential, but they should be measured by results rather than specific techniques. If a soldier can deliver accurate fire when needed, the specific method they use to achieve that accuracy is less important than the outcome." Elena continued with a practical example that illustrated her point. "During my deployment in Afghanistan, I worked with a sniper who had lost 2 fingers on his shooting hand from an IED explosion. He developed modified techniques that allowed him to continue serving effectively in his role. His accuracy remained exceptional, but his grip and stance were different from textbook standards. Should he have been removed from duty because his technique wasn't conventional?" Davis nodded thoughtfully, clearly understanding Elena's perspective on the relationship between technique and effectiveness. "That makes sense. Results matter more than how you achieve them, as long as you're meeting the performance standards." Elena felt cautiously optimistic that her response had addressed Davis's concerns while reinforcing the value of adaptive instruction. However, she also understood that Morrison's challenge had created ongoing questions about her instructional philosophy that would need to be addressed through demonstrated effectiveness rather than theoretical discussions. The afternoon training session focused on advanced environmental calculations and long-range shooting theory, areas where Elena's technical expertise was clearly superior to Morrison's practical knowledge. Her instruction was detailed and sophisticated, covering atmospheric effects, ballistic coefficients, and trajectory optimization with the depth of understanding that came from years of study and application. Morrison participated in the theoretical instruction as a student, rather than challenging Elena's expertise in areas where her knowledge was demonstrably superior. His silence during the technical discussions was tactical rather than respectful, recognizing that direct challenges to Elena's theoretical knowledge would be counterproductive to his broader campaign. As the day concluded, Elena reflected on Morrison's strategic approach to undermining her position within the program. His methods were sophisticated and professional, using philosophical arguments about military standards to create doubt about her instructional methods without resorting to personal attacks or unprofessional behavior. The campaign was effective because it appealed to deeply held beliefs about military excellence while positioning Elena's adaptive approaches as compromises rather than legitimate alternatives. Elena understood that Morrison's next move would likely involve creating situations where her physical limitations would be tested under conditions that favored his superior capabilities. The theoretical debates had been preliminary maneuvers in a campaign that would ultimately be decided by practical demonstrations of competence under challenging conditions that the setup for what would become the defining moment of Elena's time at FOB Serpent began 3 days later with an emergency briefing that interrupted the program's normal training schedule. Sergeant Williams burst into the classroom where Elena was conducting a lesson on ballistic calculations, his expression grim and his movements urgent in a way that immediately commanded everyone's attention. "Training is suspended immediately," Williams announced to the assembled group. "We have a real-world situation developing that requires all available personnel. Report to the command center in 5 minutes for emergency briefing." Elena felt her pulse quicken as she secured her training materials and followed the students toward the command center. Real-world emergencies at FOB Serpent were rare but always serious, typically involving either direct threats to the base or situations requiring immediate tactical response from the Special Operations personnel stationed there. The command center was a hive of activity when the advanced marksmanship group arrived, with communication specialists coordinating multiple radio frequencies and intelligence analysts updating tactical displays with incoming information. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander, stood at the center of the controlled chaos, her expression reflecting the gravity of whatever situation was unfolding. "Listen up," Colonel Hayes called out as the room fell silent. At approximately 13:47 hours, armed militants seized control of the provincial governor's compound in Kamal District, 12 kilometers southeast of our position. Initial reports indicate they're holding at least 12 hostages, including the governor, his family, and several international aid workers. Elena studied the tactical display showing the compound's layout as Hayes continued the briefing. The governor's residence was a fortified complex with high walls, multiple buildings, and limited access points that would make any rescue operation extremely challenging. The militants' position was defensible, and their hostages provided significant leverage against any military response. Afghan National Army forces have surrounded the compound, but they lack the specialized capabilities required for a hostage rescue operation, Hayes explained. The militants are armed with automatic weapons and have demonstrated their willingness to kill hostages if their demands aren't met. They've already executed one guard as a warning. Morrison leaned forward in his chair, his expression showing the focused intensity that combat situations typically brought out in experienced soldiers. Elena could see him mentally analyzing the tactical situation and calculating the requirements for a successful rescue operation. Hayes turned to address Williams directly. "Sergeant Williams, I need your best marksman ready for immediate deployment. This situation may require precision fire capabilities that exceed our standard infantry resources." Elena felt a chill of apprehension as she realized the implications of Hayes's request. The advanced marksmanship program participants were being considered for involvement in an actual combat operation where lives hung in the balance. Her physical limitations, which had been manageable during training exercises, could become critical factors in a real-world scenario. "Ma'am, my students are all qualified marksmen, but this is a training program rather than an operational unit," Williams replied carefully. "Most of these soldiers aren't assigned to units that conduct hostage rescue operations." Hayes nodded understanding but pressed forward with her request. "I understand the limitations, Sergeant Williams, but we may not have choices about personnel availability. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, and we need to prepare all possible options for response." Intelligence Specialist Martinez approached the tactical display with updated information from reconnaissance assets. Ma'am, drone surveillance shows the militants have positioned sentries at strategic points throughout the compound. Any rescue attempt would require neutralizing multiple targets simultaneously to prevent them from executing hostages. Elena studied the intelligence imagery, noting the defensive positions the militants had established and the sight lines they commanded. Over the compound's interior, the tactical challenge was complex, requiring multiple precision shooters, operating in coordination to eliminate threats without endangering the hostages. Morrison raised his hand to address Colonel Hayes directly. Ma'am, I have extensive experience with similar operations during my deployment with 5th Special Forces Group. I'm confident in my ability to contribute effectively to any rescue operation you're planning. Elena admired Morrison's confidence while feeling increasingly anxious about her own potential role in the developing situation. His qualifications for dangerous operations were unquestioned, while her medical limitations made her participation problematic regardless of her technical knowledge and training experience. Hayes acknowledged Morrison's volunteer status while continuing to brief the assembled group on the tactical situation. The compound's layout presents significant challenges. For any rescue attempt, the militants control multiple buildings with interconnected sight lines, and they've positioned hostages in locations that would make them vulnerable to crossfire during any assault. Elena found herself drawn into the tactical problem despite her concerns about personal involvement. The intellectual challenge of developing solutions for complex operational requirements was compelling, and her analytical mind began working through possible approaches to the hostage rescue scenario. Colonel Hayes, Elena said, raising her hand to contribute to the discussion. The intelligence imagery shows several elevated positions outside the compound that could provide overwatch for a rescue operation. Precision marksmen positioned at those locations could potentially neutralize sentries simultaneously while providing security for assault teams. Hayes examined the locations Elena had identified on the tactical display, her expression showing interest in the suggested approach. Elaborate on that assessment, Corporal Vasquez. What distances and shot angles are we looking at for those positions? Elena moved to the display and began pointing out specific terrain features that could support sniper positions. The water tower, approximately 800 meters northeast, provides excellent elevation and sight lines into the compound's courtyard. The communications tower at 950 meters southeast could cover the main building's windows and roof positions. Morrison watched Elena's tactical analysis with grudging respect for her technical competence, while simultaneously calculating how the demanding shot requirements might expose her physical limitations. The distances and angles she had identified would challenge even exceptional marksmen under ideal conditions. Those are challenging shots under the best circumstances, Morrison commented, his tone neutral but his implication clear. Precision at those ranges requires exceptional stability and weapon control, especially when civilian lives depend on first-round accuracy. Elena understood Morrison's subtle challenge but focused on providing comprehensive tactical analysis, rather than responding to his implied doubts about her capabilities. The shot angles are difficult but manageable with proper preparation and equipment. Wind conditions would be the primary variable affecting accuracy at those distances. Colonel Hayes appreciated the technical discussion, but needed to make practical decisions about operational planning. Sergeant Williams, I want your best 2 marksmen prepared for potential deployment to those overwatch positions. This is a contingency plan, but we may need to execute rapidly if negotiations fail. Williams glanced between Elena and Morrison, clearly recognizing that they represented his most qualified personnel, despite the competitive dynamics that had been developing between them. Ma'am, I recommend Staff Sergeant Morrison and Corporal Vasquez for the overwatch positions. They have the technical knowledge and experience required for these challenging shots. Elena felt her stomach tighten at Williams's recommendation. knowing that actual combat deployment would test her capabilities under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Morrison's expression showed satisfaction at being selected while also revealing anticipation about testing Elena's abilities under real-world pressure. "Roger, Sergeant Williams," Hayes replied. "Get them prepared for immediate deployment. We'll continue negotiations with the militants, but I want contingency plans ready if the situation deteriorates further." Elena gathered her equipment with deliberate calm, drawing on mental preparation techniques from her combat experience to manage the anxiety and adrenaline that came with mission preparation. Her personal rifle would need to be configured for the specific distances and conditions at the overwatch positions, and her ammunition selection would be critical for achieving the precision required. Morrison's preparation was equally methodical but carried the confidence of someone who had no doubts about his ability to perform under pressure. His equipment selection emphasized reliability and proven performance, choosing gear combinations that had served him well during previous high-stakes operations. As they prepared their gear, Elena overheard Morrison speaking quietly with Specialist Chun about the tactical requirements for the potential mission. "The shots Vasquez identified are at the limits of effective precision shooting," Morrison said, his voice low but carrying to Elena's position nearby. "Margin for error is essentially zero when hostages are involved." Elena understood that Morrison was continuing his campaign to create doubt about her capabilities, using the high-stakes nature of the potential mission to emphasize the importance of maximum physical capability. His concerns weren't unfounded. The tactical situation would indeed demand exceptional performance under extreme pressure. The weapons preparation area became a focus of intense activity as Elena and Morrison readied their rifles for potential deployment. Elena's equipment modifications were subtle but comprehensive, optimizing every component for maximum accuracy within the constraints of her physical limitations. Her preparation was thorough and professional, drawing on years of experience with precision shooting equipment. Morrison's rifle configuration emphasized raw capability and aggressive optimization for maximum performance. His equipment choices reflected confidence in his physical ability to handle demanding recoil and maintain control under rapid-fire conditions. The contrast between their approaches was apparent to anyone familiar with advanced marksmanship equipment. Intelligence updates continued streaming into the command center as Elena and Morrison completed their preparations. The militants' demands included prisoner releases and safe passage out of the country, requirements that government negotiators were unwilling to meet. The likelihood of military intervention was increasing as diplomatic options became exhausted. Elena felt the familiar pre-mission tension building as she completed her equipment checks and mental preparation routines. The combination of personal stakes and professional responsibility created pressure that exceeded anything she had experienced during training exercises. Morrison's proximity and obvious confidence added psychological pressure that she forced herself to compartmentalize and manage. The final equipment inspection by Williams was thorough and professional, ensuring that both Elena and Morrison had everything required for the challenging mission they might be called upon to execute. Elena's modified rifle passed inspection without comment, though Williams clearly noted the specialized configurations she had implemented. As they waited for final deployment orders, Elena reflected on the irony of her situation. The physical limitations that had ended her combat career were about to be tested under conditions where lives depended on her performance. The upcoming mission would either validate her adaptive techniques or confirm Morrison's arguments about the importance of uncompromising physical standards. The call to deploy came at 16:23, hours when diplomatic negotiations reached a complete impasse, and the militants issued a final ultimatum threatening to execute hostages unless their demands were met within 2 hours. Colonel Hayes made the decision to authorize tactical intervention. and Elena found herself loading into a transport helicopter alongside Morrison for what would become the most challenging shot of her military career. The flight to the Overwatch positions took 8 minutes across terrain that Elena studied intently through the helicopter's windows. The compound looked smaller from the air than it had appeared in the intelligence photos, with the various buildings clustered together in a way that created complex sightlines and potential areas of dead space where militants could move unobserved. Morrison occupied the seat across from Elena in the helicopter, his expression focused and determined as he reviewed the tactical plan one final time. His confidence was evident in his relaxed posture and steady breathing, showing none of the anxiety that Elena was working to suppress through controlled breathing and mental preparation techniques. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through their headsets as they approached the insertion point. 2 minutes to insertion. Weather conditions on target are winds from the southeast at 12 knots with gusts to 18. Temperature is 42 degrees Celsius with clear visibility. Elena acknowledged the weather update while calculating its impact on her shooting solutions. The wind conditions were manageable but would require careful reading and compensation at the extended ranges she would be engaging. The temperature differential between her position and the target area would also affect bullet trajectory in ways that required precise calculation. Morrison's insertion point was the communications tower position, which provided excellent elevation and sight lines but required a technically challenging climb to reach the optimal shooting platform. Elena's assignment was the water tower position, which offered a more accessible setup but required longer shots with more complex wind compensation. Due to terrain features, Elena's feet touched the ground near the water tower at 16:31 hours, giving her 29 minutes to establish her shooting position and coordinate with Morrison before the militant's deadline expired. The tower's access ladder was rusty but solid, allowing her to climb to the observation platform that would serve as her shooting position. The view from the water tower exceeded Elena's expectations, providing clear sight lines into multiple areas of the compound where intelligence had indicated militant positions. She could see the main building where hostages were believed to be held, the courtyard where sentries had been positioned, and the various defensive positions the militants had established. Elena's rifle setup required careful attention to every detail that would affect accuracy at the demanding ranges she would be engaging. Her shooting position used the tower's railing as primary support, with her modified sling providing additional stability that compensated for her reduced grip strength. The setup was methodical and thorough, incorporating lessons learned from years of precision shooting under challenging conditions. Morrison's voice came through her radio as he established communications from his position at the communications tower. Overwatch 2 in position. I have visual on 3 confirmed targets in the northeast sector of the compound. Range estimates are between 850 and 900 meters. Elena keyed her radio to respond while continuing to scan the compound through her rifle scope. Overwatch 1 in position. I have visual on 2 confirmed targets in the courtyard area and 1 possible target on the main building's rooftop. Range estimates are 780 to 820 meters. The tactical coordination between the 2 Overwatch positions required precise timing and communication to ensure simultaneous engagement of multiple targets. Elena and Morrison would need to coordinate their shots to eliminate threats before the militants could react and potentially harm hostages. Ground control's voice came through their radios with updated intelligence from surveillance assets. Overwatch positions. Be advised that thermal imaging shows hostages located in the main building's first floor, eastern rooms. Militants appear to be using them as human shields during any potential rescue attempt. Elena adjusted her scopes, focused to examine the main building's windows more carefully, looking for any signs of hostage locations or militant positions that might affect her engagement priorities. The intelligence about human shields added complexity to shot selection and required absolute precision to avoid unintended casualties. Morrison's radio transmission indicated he had identified additional targets from his elevated position. Ground control. I have visual on 4 militants total from my position. 2 are stationary sentries. 2 appear to be roving patrols with automatic weapons. Request clarification on engagement priorities. Elena's own target assessment revealed a complex tactical situation where multiple militants were positioned throughout the compound in locations that provided mutual support and overlapping fields of fire. Eliminating them would require precise coordination and flawless execution from both overwatch positions. Ground control provided the engagement criteria that would govern their shots. Overwatch positions. You are authorized to engage targets that pose immediate threat to hostages or rescue teams. Priority targets are sentries with direct sight lines to hostage locations. Engagement is authorized on ground commander's signal. Elena felt her heart rate increase as she realized the mission was moving from preparation to execution phase. Her shooting solutions were calculated and ready. Her equipment was optimized for the conditions, and her mental preparation was complete. The next few minutes would determine whether her adaptive techniques could perform under the ultimate test of combat conditions. Morrison's position allowed him to engage targets on the compound's north and east sides, while Elena's water tower position provided coverage of the south and west areas. Their fields of fire complemented each other perfectly, creating overlapping zones of responsibility that would prevent militants from escaping or repositioning during the engagement. Elena's primary target was a sentry position near the main building's entrance, approximately 800 meters from her position. The shot angle required her to account for wind drift, temperature effects, and the slight elevation difference between her position and the target. Her calculations were methodical and precise, drawing on years of experience with long range shooting. Morrison's voice came through the radio with confirmation that he was ready for coordinated engagement. Overwatch 2 ready to engage primary target. Range 860 meters. Wind compensation calculated for current conditions. Standing by for execution order. Elena completed her final preparations and confirmed her readiness through the radio network. Overwatch 1 ready to engage primary target. Range 810 meters. Environmental factors calculated and compensated. Standing by for execution order. The ground commander's voice crackled through their headsets with the authorization they had been waiting for. All Overwatch positions, you are cleared to engage designated targets on my mark. Execute, execute, execute. Elena's finger moved to her rifle's trigger as she settled into her final shooting position. Her breathing was controlled and steady. Her sight picture was perfect, and her grip was optimized for the demanding shot she was about to take. The months of training and preparation had led to this single moment where everything would be decided by the precision of her technique. Morrison fired first, his shot breaking cleanly and striking his designated target with devastating accuracy. Elena heard the distant crack of his rifle through her headset, just as she completed her own final sight alignment and began her trigger sequence. Elena's shot broke with perfect timing, the bullet leaving her rifle with the precision that came from years of careful preparation and optimized technique. Through her scope, she watched the projectile's flight path across the 800 meters to the target, her calculations proving accurate as the bullet struck exactly where she had aimed. The coordinate engagement was flawless, with both Overwatch positions eliminating their designated targets simultaneously and creating the conditions for the rescue team to begin their assault on the compound. Elena's adaptive techniques had performed perfectly under the most demanding conditions, proving that technical excellence could overcome physical limitations when properly applied. Morrison's follow-up shots engaged additional targets with continued Accuracy, his superior physical capabilities, allowing him to transition rapidly between multiple engagements. Elena's own follow-up shots were equally precise, but executed with the deliberate technique that characterized her compensated approach to precision shooting. Within 4 minutes, the coordinated overwatch fire had eliminated all identified threats and created the tactical conditions necessary for the rescue team to enter the compound safely. Elena and Morrison had executed one of the most challenging precision shooting missions possible, with their combined fire supporting a successful hostage rescue operation. Elena's radio crackled with confirmation from the ground commander that all hostages had been secured and the compound was under friendly control. Outstanding shooting from both overwatch positions. Mission successful. All hostages recovered alive and unharmed. The mission's success validated Elena's adaptive approach to precision shooting while demonstrating that technical excellence and proper preparation could achieve results that matched or exceeded traditional methods. Morrison's exceptional performance had been crucial to the mission's success, but Elena's contribution had been equally vital and professionally executed. As Elena secured her equipment and prepared for extraction, she reflected on the significance of what had just occurred. Her physical limitations had not prevented her from performing effectively under the most demanding conditions imaginable, and her adaptive techniques had proven themselves in actual combat where lives depended on absolute precision. The extraction helicopter touched down at FOB Serpent 47 minutes after the successful conclusion of the hostage rescue operation, and Elena found herself stepping onto the landing pad with a profound sense of accomplishment that went far beyond the technical success of her shooting performance. The mission had validated everything she had worked to prove about the effectiveness of adaptive techniques and proper preparation in overcoming physical limitations. Morrison emerged from the helicopter with his usual confident bearing, but Elena noticed a subtle change in his demeanor that suggested the day's events had affected his perspective on her capabilities. His earlier skepticism about her methods had been tempered by witnessing their effectiveness under the most demanding conditions possible, where theoretical discussions gave way to practical results that could not be argued or explained away. Colonel Hayes was waiting at the landing pad with Sergeant Williams and several other senior officers, their expressions reflecting both relief at the mission's success and recognition of the exceptional performance that had made it possible. The hostage rescue had been flawless, with all 12 civilians recovered safely and no friendly casualties during the operation. Outstanding work by both overwatch positions, Colonel Hayes announced as Elena and Morrison approached the waiting group. Your precision shooting enabled the ground team to execute the rescue without casualties. That's exactly the kind of performance we expect from our advanced marksmanship specialists. Elena accepted the praise professionally while feeling a deep satisfaction that came from proving her capabilities under the ultimate test of combat conditions. The months of doubt and questioning about her role in elite military training had been answered definitively by her performance when lives depended on absolute precision and reliability. Morrison stepped forward to provide his assessment of the mission to Colonel Hayes and the assembled officers. Ma'am, the coordination between overwatch positions was textbook perfect. Corporal Vasquez's technical preparation and shooting execution were exceptional under extremely challenging conditions. Elena was surprised by Morrison's unqualified praise, recognizing that his acknowledgement represented a significant shift from his previous attempts to undermine her credibility through questions about physical standards and adaptive techniques. The mission had provided undeniable evidence that her methods could achieve results that met or exceeded traditional approaches. Sergeant Williams approached Elena with a formal evaluation folder that would document her performance during the hostage rescue operation. Corporal Vasquez, your shooting today was some of the finest precision marksmanship I've witnessed in 23 years of military service. That 800-meter shot under pressure was absolutely perfect. Elena reviewed the mission documentation that Williams provided, noting that her performance metrics had exceeded established standards for precision shooting under combat conditions. The official record would reflect that her adaptive techniques had proven effective in actual operations rather than just training exercises. Intelligence Specialist Martinez joined the group with detailed after-action analysis from surveillance assets that had monitored the entire operation. Both Overwatch positions achieved first-round hits on designated targets with simultaneous timing that prevented any militant response. The precision and coordination were essential to preventing hostage casualties. Elena felt vindicated by the objective analysis that confirmed the technical excellence of her performance, independent of any personal opinions about her methods or qualifications. The electronic surveillance data provided irrefutable evidence that her shooting had met the demanding standards required for successful mission completion. Morrison's interaction with Elena following the mission debrief was markedly different from his previous challenges and probing questions about her capabilities. "Corporal Vasquez, I owe you an acknowledgement about your shooting techniques," he said quietly as they walked toward the equipment storage area. "Your performance today was exceptional by any standard." Elena appreciated Morrison's professional recognition while understanding that their competitive dynamic had been fundamentally changed by the day's events. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant Morrison. Your own shooting was equally impressive, and the mission's success required both positions performing flawlessly." Morrison paused in his equipment storage routine to address the broader implications of what had occurred during the hostage rescue. "I've been thinking about our previous discussions regarding physical standards and adaptive techniques. Today demonstrated that results matter more than specific methods when lives are on the line." Elena recognized that Morrison was acknowledging the validity of her instructional approach while maintaining his own commitment to traditional methods that worked effectively for his physical capabilities. "Different approaches can achieve the same objectives," Elena agreed. "The key is optimizing technique for individual circumstances while maintaining performance standards." Morrison nodded thoughtfully, his expression suggesting genuine reconsideration of positions he had held about the relationship between physical capability and shooting performance. "I still believe physical conditioning is important, but I can see that technical knowledge and proper preparation can compensate for limitations in ways I hadn't fully appreciated." Elena felt a sense of professional satisfaction that went beyond personal validation, recognizing that Morrison's changed perspective would influence how he approached instruction and evaluation of other soldiers who might have physical limitations or need adaptive techniques. The mission had provided education for both of them about different paths to excellence. The Advanced Marksmanship Program. Students gathered in Building C7 that evening for an informal discussion of the day's events and their implications for ongoing training. Elena found herself in the unusual position of being sought out for guidance by students who had previously been uncertain about her qualifications and methods. Corporal Torres approached Elena with questions about the technical aspects of her mission performance. "Corporal Vasquez, could you walk through your preparation process for today's shots? I'm trying to understand how you achieved that level of precision under such demanding conditions." Elena appreciated the opportunity to share lessons learned from the mission while reinforcing the instructional principles she had been teaching throughout the program. "The key was methodical preparation and absolute confidence in my equipment and calculations," she explained. "Every variable was accounted for and compensated through technique rather than relying on raw physical capability." Elena's detailed explanation of her shooting process drew attention from other students who gathered to hear her analysis of the mission requirements and execution. Her approach was systematic and thorough, emphasizing the intellectual and technical aspects of precision shooting that complemented physical skills. Specialist Chun raised a question about the psychological aspects of shooting under extreme pressure. with hostage lives at stake. How did you manage the stress of knowing that any mistake could result in civilian casualties? That seems like it would be overwhelming pressure. Elena drew on her combat experience to address Chin's concerns about performance under life or death pressure. Mental preparation and absolute confidence in your capabilities are essential. If you've done the technical work properly and prepared your equipment correctly, you trust the process and execute without overthinking the consequences. Morrison joined the group discussion and added his own perspective on managing pressure during critical missions. Corporal Vasquez is right about trusting your preparation. Today's mission succeeded because both Overwatch positions had done the technical work necessary to perform when it mattered most. Elena appreciated Morrison's support for her instructional approach, recognizing that his endorsement would carry significant weight with students who had looked to him for leadership throughout the program. Their professional partnership had evolved from competitive rivalry to mutual respect. Based on demonstrated competence, Sergeant Williams entered the discussion area with official notification about Elena's future assignment at FOB Serpent. Corporal Vasquez, based on today's performance and your effectiveness as an instructor, Colonel Hayes has requested that you be assigned permanently to the Special Training Detachment as Senior Marksmanship Instructor. Elena felt surprise and gratification at the unexpected assignment offer, recognizing that her performance had exceeded expectations and earned recognition that went beyond completing her original training duties. The permanent position would allow her to continue developing adaptive instruction techniques while working with elite military personnel. The position comes with promotion to sergeant and specialized instructor certification, Williams continued. You'll be responsible for developing curriculum that incorporates both traditional and adaptive approaches to advanced marksmanship training. Elena accepted the assignment with professional pride, understanding that her experience had demonstrated the value of inclusive instruction that maximized individual potential rather than enforcing uniform approaches. The new role would allow her to influence military training policy while serving soldiers who needed alternatives to standard techniques. Morrison approached Elena after Williams had concluded the official notification process. Congratulations on the promotion and assignment, Sergeant Vasquez. I think this Special Training Detachment will benefit significantly from your knowledge and experience. Elena appreciated Morrison's congratulations while reflecting on how dramatically their relationship had evolved from competitive antagonism to mutual professional respect. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Morrison. I hope we'll have opportunities to continue working together on challenging training problems. Morrison smiled with genuine warmth for the first time since Elena had arrived at FOB Serpent. I'm looking forward to learning more about your adaptive techniques. Today showed me that there's always room to improve understanding of different approaches to excellence. Elena realized that her journey at FOB Serpent had come full circle from uncertainty about her role in elite military training to recognition as a subject matter expert whose methods had proven effective under the most demanding conditions. The hostage rescue mission had provided the ultimate validation of her capabilities while opening new opportunities for professional development and service. As the evening concluded and students dispersed to their quarters, Elena reflected on the significance of her transformation from questioning her worth to confidently choosing her own path forward. The advanced marksmanship program had tested her abilities, challenged her assumptions, and ultimately confirmed that excellence could be achieved through multiple approaches when properly applied with dedication and preparation. The weak grip that had once seemed like a career-ending limitation had become the foundation for developing innovative techniques that proved their worth when lives hung in the balance. Elena's single shot had indeed ended the 12-hour standoff, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that true strength came from maximizing whatever capabilities were available rather than accepting limitations as permanent barriers to achievement. 6 months later, Elena stood before a packed auditorium at the Special Operations Command headquarters, delivering a keynote presentation on adaptive marksmanship techniques to an audience of military instructors from around the world. Her methods had been formally adopted into training curricula across multiple service branches, helping countless soldiers optimize their capabilities regardless of physical limitations. Morrison sat in the front row, now serving as Elena's deputy, instructor and co-developer of the revolutionary training program they had created together. Their former rivalry had evolved into a partnership that combined his exceptional physical capabilities with her innovative technical approaches, producing results that exceeded either method alone. The presentation screen displayed statistics, showing dramatic improvements in marksmanship scores across units that had implemented Elena's adaptive techniques. Soldiers who had previously struggled with traditional methods were now achieving expert-level performance through optimized equipment and individualized instruction approaches. Excellence isn't about meeting someone else's definition of perfection. Elena concluded her presentation. It's about maximizing your unique potential to achieve mission success when it matters most. Every soldier deserves techniques that work for their specific circumstances. The standing ovation that followed reflected more than professional appreciation. It represented recognition that military training could be both demanding and inclusive, maintaining the highest standards while providing multiple paths to achieving them. Elena's journey from rejected combat soldier to renowned instructor had proven that limitations were often opportunities in disguise, waiting for the right perspective and determination to transform them into strengths. What seemed like Elena's biggest weakness became her greatest strength, revolutionizing military training forever. Her story proves that our perceived limitations might just be the key to our greatest achievements. If this story inspired you to see challenges differently, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more incredible true stories of triumph against the odds. What limitation in your life could become your superpower? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire our next video.